So I had a very traumatic experience recently. I sat through something that's had a lasting, maybe permanent effect on me, and as a kind of a coping mechanism, kind of therapy, I wrote down some of my thoughts on this to try to...
Why?
To try to
6 pages of thoughts.
To try to work through this. And so let me get through this, because I need to get this off my chest, and I hope everybody listening will get something out of this too.
He's unfolding the Soapmaster 2000, the world's most dynamic soapbox.
Sometimes bad movies can be fun to watch, right? They're so bad that they're funny. Laughing at the horrible dialogue, the bad acting, the plot lines that make no sense. This provides more entertainment than the film itself. And you can think about like bad old school sci-fi movies like Plan 9 from Outer Space, or a more current favorite with fans of bad movies, The Room. You can watch Mariah Carey's Glitter, or just about anything Nicolas Cage has been in the last 20 years, and you'll be entertained, but not for the reasons the movie makers intended. Dark Crimes is not one of those so bad it's good films. It's just the ordinary kind of bad. No, actually it's worse. It's the kind of bad that leaves you confused, wondering how it got made at all. It has no redeeming qualities. I can't think of a single compliment to pay this film.
You sound so upset, John.
Oh, I am. I am, Dave. I'm just getting started.
All right.
I downloaded it from the Pirate Bay, and I still feel like I should get a refund. This movie just plain sucks. Now, normally I wouldn't care about a movie like Dark Crimes, but I was interested, and it's relevant to our show because it was filmed here in Krakow. I first heard about it at the end of 2015, when there were mentions in the local media about the presence of Jim Carrey and a few well-known Polish actors and actresses that were seen here around town. Now, at the time, the working title of the film was True Crime, which is the name of the feature story that it's based on. That story was first published in the Atlantic magazine in 2008.
New Yorker, wasn't it? Magazine.
I'm pretty sure it was the Atlantic.
The link you sent me was the New Yorker.
Double check that. But thanks anyway, Dave. I'll keep going. Thanks for wrecking my train.
It sounded so knowledgeable. I just wanted to bring you back down to earth. You know, I can't even remember what paper you're linking to.
Actually, now that I scroll up, I see that you're right. All right. The New Yorker magazine, Atlantic magazine, basically the same thing. Who cares? But in the New Yorker magazine,
Nishi Coates will be after you now, John.
2008. It's the account of a murder, a true crime that took place in Poland in the year 2000. Now, by the way, there are spoilers ahead, and I don't feel at all bad about this because Jim Carrey spoiled my evening, so I guess we're even now. Anyway, this murder, as I said, took place in the year 2000, and the cops were at a dead end in the case. They couldn't track the killer. But one tenacious detective on the case kept digging, kept the case alive, before finally noticing that one of the suspects in the case, a writer, published what was obviously a slightly fictionalized account of the murder in a novel he wrote, which was enough to get the case rolling again. And, surprise, and again, spoilers ahead, the writer was the murderer. He got 25 years in prison, and that's where he's sitting right now, actually. There were media reports a few years ago that police found evidence on a computer that he's planning another murder when he gets out of prison as the basis for a sequel to his first book. So we have that to look forward to. Back to the movie. And by the way, I'm not sure why the name was changed from True Crime to Dark Crimes, although I suspect it has something to do with the author of the original piece published in The New Yorker being embarrassed at his association with this abomination of a film. Now, Dark Crimes will have an extremely, extremely limited theatrical release, which probably means a single midnight screening at some art house in New York, before going straight to video. That's right. It couldn't find a distributor. It's so bad it couldn't find a distributor for a proper release, and so the producers sold the rights to DirecTV, which is an American video-on-demand service. So back to Jim Carrey. Let's talk about him. Now, after rocketing to fame on the back of Ace Ventura, his career since then has had a strange mix of esoteric artsy films, kids' movies and the kind of goofy comedies that propelled him to stardom.
This is your life, Jim.
But if you look carefully, you'll see that for every critical or financial hit, there have been 2 or 3 bombs. Now, to his credit, Jim Carrey has taken on several roles that it's hard to imagine any other actor playing well. I think he was amazing in I Love You, Philip Morris and Man on the Moon. But when you look at films like The Number 23 or Fun with Dick and Jane or Kick-Ass 2 and a long list of others, you realize that not everything he touches turns to gold. In the last 12 or 15 years, the trend in his career, as measured by the success of the films he's in, is down, down, down. I think it has hit rock bottom now. Maybe Dark Crimes is an attempt to establish some kind of artistic credibility for a man who's getting too old to be a rubber-faced, over-the-top comedian. It's hard to imagine that he's desperate for money. If I had to guess, I would say he was somehow blackmailed into doing Dark Crimes. I challenge you to watch it and think of any other reasonable explanation. You know, sometimes you can tell you've made a bad choice before a film even really starts. You can tell a lot about a film by where it gets its financing. Now, I'm certainly not saying that all well-financed films are good, but as a general rule, a film that gets financed by, let's say, alternative sources is much more likely to be bad. Dark Crimes is a production of something called the Los Angeles Media Fund, which I'd never heard of. I looked it up and I learned that it's a small production company in Los Angeles. Okay, nothing wrong with being small, but they financed 7 films, ever. Not a good sign. Dark Crimes has 14 co-producers, associate producers, producers, and executive producers, which means that someone was desperately working the telephones asking their friends to contribute $10,000 or so that the crew could pay the sound guys or the caterers on the set in exchange for a producer credit. Again, bad sign of things to come. But when private individuals invest in a film, that's their business. If they don't get the money back, it's their risk. I have a bigger problem with other sources of financing in this disaster of a movie. Now, before I tell you what those sources are, I'm going to step into an argument here, as I like to do, and it's an argument that I'm happy to have another time. But for now, let me just say that governments shouldn't finance films for commercial release. Governments shouldn't finance films. Educational material, culturally specific content of the kind that does not end up in Cinema City, okay, fine. But films are business projects. Studios and directors and producers and the production crew, and certainly the people who appear on camera, do this for money. When you see that some government office has provided financing for a film made with the intention of selling tickets and Blu-rays and putting it on Netflix and so on, it means that private backers have looked at the film, looked at the script, looked at the people attached to it, and decided that it's going to be a financial disaster. 99 times out of 100, they are right. Government is the financier of last resort. Government is where artists go when their only argument is, our film will create jobs in your city, or our film will promote tourism to your city. And if that's the only argument they have, then you can guess what kind of movie it's going to be. When you see a film that's supported by this council or that foundation, go ahead and take out your phone, start scrolling through your Facebook feed or something, anything to distract you from what you're about to watch. Like I said, part of an entirely different argument we can have another day. But this is when I knew for sure that Dark Crimes was going to be awful. When I read on the screen, and this is a quote, financed with the support of the Polish Film Institute, the City of Krakow, and the Krakow Film Commission. Yeah, that's right. The people who can't fix broken ticket machines on trams and buses, the people who can't remove graffiti from buildings all over the city, the people who can't find enough money to open enough preschools are in the movie-making business. Yeah, makes sense, right? Now, the main reason I even wanted to watch this film was the expectation that a lot of locations around Krakow would appear in it. It's cool to see familiar sights from your own city in the movies, right? Now, since the city of Krakow somehow financially supported the film, I was sure that a condition of their support would be nice, tourism-friendly images of well-known sites like Wawel Castle or the Rynek, or probably other locations scattered around the city. But there was none of that. This is just another of the many, many ways that Dark Crimes disappoints. Incredibly, there are just a couple of exterior shots that show places that those of us who live here might recognize. There's a short scene of cars driving over the Ofiardombia Bridge, the one that with the locks that control the level of the river. There are a few scenes filmed at night. Almost everything in this movie is filmed at night. on the top of Kopiec Kościuszki. There are exterior scenes in a couple of buildings in Nowa Huta. They use the interior of the, I guess, abandoned Forum Hotel on the river. Oh, and there's one more location using it's kind of funny. There's a scene where Jim Carrey is driving, looking very intense, which something we'll talk about soon, his intensity. He's looking very intense. And he has that same expression for basically the entire movie, this intensity. Anyway, he's driving a car in the tunnel, the car tunnel that goes under the train station, the one between Pavia Street and the little roundabout in front of the bus station. The funny thing is that if you're familiar with that road, if you live here, you can tell that he drives through one tunnel, arrives at the roundabout, goes through it, and drives out in the exact same direction he just came from through the other tunnel going the other way. Okay, maybe not exactly funny, but weird, right? Maybe he was looking so intense because he knew he was driving in a circle for no reason. Anyway, another confusing element of this film is its setting in time. Watching the film, you don't know if it's supposed to be in the present day or not. The cinematography uses a filter on the lens that washes most of the color out, like they're going for a late 80s or early 90s Eastern Bloc feel. Everything is a shade of gray or army green. One scene has a bust of Lenin, and that's Vladimir Lenin for you millennials, on a shelf in the background. Jim Carrey's character, a policeman, uses VHS tapes to review evidence from the case. There are no mobile phones or references to the internet. Most of the cars are older models, and we'll talk about Jim Carrey's car soon as well. They're older models, like from the 90s, and Jim Carrey's car even has one of those old pre-EU license plates, the ones that are all black with the white letters and numbers. You know, the kind that nobody has anymore. But at the same time, all the police, and there are lots of them, drive shiny new Kias. So is this story taking place in the present day or at some time in the past? It's hard to say. But after about 15 minutes of Dark Crimes, you really won't care. If you're like me, after 15 minutes of Dark Crimes, you'll start wondering when it will all be over. I said earlier that I can't think of a good thing to say about the film itself, but I will admit there are some kind of positives associated with it. It brought jobs to Krakow. It gave a lot of people a chance to get some experience in film production, and it's something that looks good on their resumes. You know, it's not their fault that Dark Crimes is awful. On the other hand, it's hard to imagine that anyone will point to this film as evidence of their expertise in what they do. It's a bit like winning a beauty contest in prison. Yeah, you might be proud of it, but do you really want everybody to know? So my review of Dark Crimes is pretty simple. It sucks. It's frustrating because I waited more than 2 years to see this film. I was ready to like it. I was interested to see what role the city would play on screen. But for anyone who lives in Krakow, Dark Crimes is a double failure. A horrible movie and a wasted opportunity to show Krakow's good side to the world. And don't just take my word for it when I say the Dark Crimes sucks. On Metacritic, it rates a surprisingly high 24 out of 100. On IMDb, it has an outrageously generous 5 out of 10. On Rotten Tomatoes, though, it has a tomato meter score of 0. 0. Not a single one of 29 movies is positive. Well, I'm positive that Dark Crimes is a horrible, horrible movie. Jim Carrey, I accuse you of committing dark crimes against cinema and find you guilty. Your punishment is to watch your own movie over and over again. The end.
So you didn't like it then?
Okay, I'm on the road to healing. I'm on the road to healing. Okay, I've said my piece.
Yeah, well, what else is there to say, really? I mean, yeah, it was John sent me an emotional email. By the way, it was beautiful to see you get that off your chest. It was one of the most riveting 13 and a half minutes of my entire life. I have to say.
I feel liberated.
You should, really. I mean, that was quite a speech. Yeah, look, it's an abomination. It's a heap of steaming crap. There's no other words for it. Jim Carrey himself is the absolute worst thing about the movie. That was the surprise to me. The accent is just dreadful. What is he doing?
I don't know.
I'm not saying I can do a convincing accent of a Polish person speaking English. It's gone out with the dogs anyway. Having a movie set in a foreign country when you're doing an accent in English, it's just aged now in the era of the Scandi drama and everyone watching TV shows with subtitles. It's just, that's the first thing. And then you'd have to have a really strong movie to get over even that hurdle. You're right, visually, you would have no idea this is set in Krakow. I was impressed with your little evidence gathering there with the bridges, etc.
I was watching carefully, yes.
I mean, yeah, what can you say? The actual article that you sent me was absolutely fascinating. That's the really frustrating thing. This is an amazingly interesting case.
It is.
You know, the guy wrote a novel about a crime and then got convicted of it. I've never heard of anything like that. You know, it's crazy. I mean, in the movie, they draw it into some conspiratorial plot with the chief of police, which culminates in this fantastic scene where Jim Carrey confronts the chief, who's now the chief, in a sunbed, and he says, "I'm the chief of police now. Fuck off out of my sunshine." That's absolutely beautiful. I did enjoy that scene. It's a very drab movie. That's the real crime here against the movie watchers. It's so dull.
You're right. It had all the true crime elements of a great movie. Everything was there waiting to be turned into an impressive film, and this is what they do.
You know, it's a lot of it consists of Jim Carrey rambling to himself, asking ridiculously simplistic sounding questions that appear to make no sense. You know, trying to look deep, staring at walls. And the only
he does a lot of staring, doesn't he?
He does do a lot of intense staring, but the only time he seems to wake up is, of course, Charlotte Gainsborough, who's a very good actress, in fairness. And the guy
she'd wake anybody up. Actually,
the guy who wrote the script, I can't remember his name now. He wrote The Last King of Scotland. There's a bit of pedigree behind the film, and there's some excellent Polish actors trying their best to work with some just dire material here. The lady from Ida, what's her name again?
The lady from Ida.
Yeah, the lady from Ida, who's a tremendous actress, is Tadek's much put upon wife, who barely gets a decent line in the whole movie. Until she suddenly, out of nowhere, threatens to leave.
Can we turn to two things? We mentioned this before we started recording. Both of us noticed two things that really stand out. One is Jim Carrey's car, and the other is his intensity.
The amount of scenes of the Passat in this film.
It is a co-star. It should
I could
get
just
credited.
picture Jim Carrey, sheepishly sitting in his trailer thinking, what have I done? I used to be on top of the world. I'm just going to get the scenes where I drive that Passat perfectly. That'll be my contribution to Passat ownership, craft around the world. It's about, what is it about? I had it pegged at about a 99 model, 2000, maybe a bit later. Colin joined the EU in 2004.
I was thinking it was more mid-90s, but yeah, maybe it is 2000. I don't know. Is that
I think it's a bit later than mid-90s.
Okay.
All right. My dad had a Passat, so I'm somewhat of an expert. And lovingly, if Krakow was shot half as lovingly as that Passat, the movie would have had some redeeming qualities.
But weren't you also expecting kind of the cliched shot of him maybe walking through the Renwick in the morning or something like that? Weren't you expecting
to be interrupted after a 13-minute cold open?
I want the mic back. It's all about me. But no, really, weren't you expecting at least some kind of postcard scene, tourism scene of the city?
At least one. I mean, it's just a sense of place for any film. Now, the only thing I can think of is that the original crime didn't take place in a big city. It took place in a little town about 60 k's from Wrocław. So maybe, they were trying to be authentic. And I suppose what they were going for is very glum, very serious depiction. Nearly everything takes place in a drab wooden room with a cross on the wall where Jim Carrey can stare and look properly intense. And it's just one of the worst performances that a major Hollywood actor has ever committed to celluloid. It has to be seen to be believed how awful he is in this film. And I was a big Jim Carrey fan in the 90s, and I like some of his more serious dramatic work, particularly The Truman Show, which I think is a bit underrated these days. That was
he has done some good, as I mentioned, he has done some really, really good work.
But this is just, a cinematic smear on his resume. It really is, and not a good smelling type of smear.
About the intensity, what quick weird reference there. You know the movie, what's it called, Lost in Translation with Bill Murray?
I've never actually seen it.
Well, there's a scene, Josh, you've seen it.
I have.
He goes to
Coppola,
he goes to Japan to film this commercial for a whiskey company, and he's on set, and of course the production crew is Japanese, and the director is giving him these instructions, very lengthy instructions in Japanese. Bill Murray can't understand. And the translator, after this long, long rant from the director, the translator steps in with two words. She says, "More intensity. More intensity." And he's like, is that all he said? Because it sounded like he said a lot more. No, more intensity. And that's what I kept thinking in this movie. I just imagine the director saying, Jim, more intensity. Every expression on his face is one of just like he's doing a really hard math problem in his head, staring at the TV monitors and just thinking and being intense. That's all he does.
Yeah, I know. It was dreadful. But, let's get back to the interesting part of this story. I mean, the book itself, Amok, off the back of all this, is somewhat of a literary sensation. And, I've never read it. It's not translated into English, and I probably wouldn't bother even if it was. But you could make a case in a way that there's not many novels that carry a backstory like this, so, I don't like to swear, but they really shot the bed on this one. I mean, how they couldn't get the semblance of an interesting plot going. Even with Jim Carrey's terrible performance, then it would have been a watchable movie. And this is what I wanted to know. How did they not give him a partner? Most cop stories, that's how the exposition's done. They're in the room working on the case. That's how you get all the fascinating little details. I mean, all I'll say is I will never forgive you, John, for recommending this movie. I was all set to watch another episode of the fabulously well scripted Bosch on Amazon. Manly, muscular cop drama I can recommend absolutely highly.
Very little I can add, except that I'm thoroughly grateful for the heads up. I will not be wasting any of my time.
So wait a second. When you hear that a movie is really, really horrible, aren't you interested kind of in a morbid sense just to see for yourself? Well,
yes. And occasionally, I might think, well, I can see why a general majority may think this is terrible, but actually there's something offbeat, quirky, unusual, unpredictable that makes this somehow, gives it some kind of value. But from what I can hear, in this case, this isn't one of those pictures.
It also contains the crappiest car chase in the history of cinema as well. I mean, this is the most undramatic minute of TV. I said TV reflexively because it looks like a television show.
It does, doesn't it?
But at the end of this car, Jim Carrey gets out of his car, stands in the middle of the road, and as his pursuer comes towards him, he shuffles out of the way with a pure Ace Ventura sideways.
It was,
That was the only bit of movie that made me laugh out loud.
Hey, isn't anybody going to say something about my super highly controversial assertion that governments shouldn't finance films?
Oh, well, I agree in general. They shouldn't be funding small independent movies where they've no control of the outcome. I mean, you could argue that the likes of the BBC co-produce some absolutely fabulous material, but it's a completely different argument, isn't it? You're talking about state-funded content in general. I mean, PBS produced some great documentaries.
TV is different, has an educational purpose.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm not saying governments should completely stay out of producing TV or movies, but definitely they shouldn't be financing
commercial
like
enterprises. That's what
is the upside?
Is.
Even the Polish characters are the actors who are of the highest pedigree are relegated to the side roles. The chief of police, the wife, Charlotte Gainsbourg gets the juiciest female role and doesn't even bother with the accent, much to her credit. And where's your man from? He's a Kiwi, isn't he? The guy
yes, from New Zealand, yeah.
Yeah, the writer.
In a more general sense, going back to Jim Carrey, doesn't it seem like he's coming off the rails a bit in the last few years, kind of, getting in the news for strange reasons and just commenting on odd things and picking strange fights?
He's always been a weird dude, but I had one observation. He's very much into this cod philosophical bullshit, Nietzschean type of statements. Is anything real? What's the definition of truth? All this crap. And there's a lot of that in this movie.
Oh, what's the quote?
A lot of 17-year-old philosophy students scrawling on his walls and wondering why, he can't figure out the meaning of things.
What's the quote from the movie about perception? And
perception is reality. Haven't you heard that in every sci-fi film ever made?
It's supposed to be a really deep line from the movie Perception is Reality. Yeah. Makes you think, huh?
Oh, yeah.
It's like a voiceover in a sci-fi film, that bit,
Well, guys, it's up to you. The film was completely horrible.
It has no redeeming
awful,
features.
awful. If you want to watch it just to see what a horrible movie looks like, go ahead. If you want to take our advice and avoid it, well, you can do that too. It's up to you. Either way, if you do watch it, let us know what you think. Leave a comment on the Facebook. Tell us how right we are. Or you know what? If you love this movie, get in touch with us and we'll invite you straight here to the studio and we'll give you a microphone and you can tell the world all about how Josh and Dave and I are completely wrong about dark crimes.
But unlike the movie, do not miss the article in the New Yorker. It's from 2008 by the writer David Gran and is subtitled A Postmodern Murder Mystery. True crime, isn't it?
Yeah, true crime. We'll link it below in the show notes.
Yes. Have a good one.